Tonight on the 10 o'clock news, a heartbreaking end to this local toddler's life. The father of 22-month-old Zamora Foe tells News4Jax his daughter was taken off life support today.
Well, the first thought that went through my head when they told me like she wasn't gonna make it no more is no man's supposed to outlive his daughter, you know? And it's crazy the way the world is, man, for real.
This story is heartbreaking, and I must warn you, it will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. On the outside, everything looked picture perfect. A baby girl with bright blue eyes and golden curls, a doting young father who had lost the ability to walk but never gave up on his daughter, and a mother who once cradled her child while softly humming lullabies. But beneath that thin veil of normalcy, a predator was already closing in, a man who would soon turn a child's world into a living hell. Zamora Lee Foe was not even 2 years old when she fell into the hands of someone who saw her not as a person, not even as a child, but as a thing to control, to torment, to destroy. Her life ended not with a tragic accident, but with deliberate cruelty. For months, she was isolated, silenced, and slowly broken, while those who should have protected her looked away or were too far gone to intervene. Today, we're going to tell the story of Zamora, a baby girl from Jacksonville, Florida, whose beautiful life was cut short by violence no child should ever endure. This is not just a true crime case. It's a call to remember, a warning, a reckoning. Let me take you back to the beginning, before everything fell apart. Zamora Lee Foe was born on November 15, 2022, in Jacksonville, Florida. A radiant soul wrapped in soft baby skin and crowned with golden fuzz that would one day grow into curls. Weighing 8 pounds and measuring 20.5 inches long, she arrived into a world that welcomed her with joy, dreams, and promise. From the moment she opened her wide, impossibly blue eyes, Zamora captivated everyone around her. She didn't just look beautiful. She radiated a kind of innocence that made strangers smile and melted the hearts of those closest to her. Her laughter came easily. Her curiosity was endless. She babbled nonsense with such conviction that it made adults laugh and lean in, as if trying to decode her tiny language. Her father, Brandon, was completely enchanted. Despite his own challenges, having lost the use of his legs in a devastating car crash just months after her birth, he made Zamora the center of his world. He cradled her against his chest while he slept. He tattooed her name on his neck, then later on his face, a permanent promise etched in ink, that his love for her would never fade. Zamora's early months were filled with joy and milestones. At 5 months, she rolled over by herself. At 6, she sat up with pride, reaching for her favorite plush giraffe, a toy she refused to let go of, even in her sleep. By her first birthday, she was wobbling between adults' hands, smearing frosting all over her beaming face, and trying to say her first words. She loved swimming in the small pool behind the house, her giggles echoing down the block. During meals, she insisted on feeding herself, even if more food ended up on her lap than in her mouth. She played, she explored, she loved, and above all, she trusted. Zamora was the kind of child whose spirit made everything feel a little lighter. But behind those bright blue eyes, no one could have imagined the shadow that was about to fall over her world. At first glance, Zamora's family seemed like many young couples trying to make it through tough times. Her parents, Brandon Foe and Za Goodwin, were both in their early 20s, barely adults themselves. And yet, in those early days, there was love, messy, imperfect, and overwhelmed by responsibility, but love nonetheless. Brandon was a devoted father. But in January 2023, just 2 months after Zamora's birth, a tragic car accident left him partially paralyzed. Doctors told him he would never walk again, and more crushingly, he might never have another child. In that moment, his daughter became more than his firstborn. She became his only, his miracle, his anchor. Za, only 18 at the time, suddenly found herself responsible not just for a baby, but for a partner in a wheelchair. The weight of that responsibility, emotional, physical, financial, fell hard on her slender shoulders. But she tried. She sang lullabies, fed Zamora with patience, and held her close every night. To help, Brandon's mother, Patricia Fox, stepped in. She doted on Zamora, calling her the most beautiful child our family has ever had. Her presence offered a sense of balance in an otherwise fragile household. But the cracks were forming. As the months passed, the constant stress began to erode the bond between Za and Brandon. Arguments replaced affection. The distance grew until by late 2023, they made the painful decision to separate. They agreed Zamora would stay with her mother, but still see her father and his family regularly. That's when Nathaniel Davis entered the picture. Za met him during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. He was charming, attentive, and quick to offer comfort. He made her feel seen, heard, less alone. He was 22, just like her, and he seemed to adore both Za and little Zamora, but no one, not Za, not the family, dug deeper into who Nathaniel really was. Just months earlier, in January 2023, Nathaniel had been arrested for domestic violence against another young woman. He pleaded not guilty and was given 12 months probation. It was a quiet case, easily overlooked, but one that, if taken seriously, could have changed everything. By the time anyone noticed something was wrong, it was already far too late. It's difficult to say exactly when the abuse began, but sometime in the spring of 2024, when Zamora was around 18 months old, subtle signs began to emerge. Signs that, in hindsight, scream with horror. At first, Nathaniel Davis appeared to be an attentive father figure. He made jokes with Zamora, let her climb into his lap, and gave her his phone to watch cartoons. But slowly his attention shifted, from playful to possessive, from friendly to obsessive. To him, Zamora wasn't a child anymore. She became something else, helpless, dependent, and disturbingly controllable. Za, caught in her own storm of exhaustion and emotional collapse, was slipping deeper into addiction. Nathaniel fed her dependence with pills and promises, keeping her sedated and silent. While Za drifted in and out of consciousness, Nathaniel had growing access to Zamora, unsupervised, unchecked. Neighbors began noticing changes. Brandon's family grew anxious as Za repeatedly canceled visits, offering vague excuses. Patricia, the grandmother who once cradled Zamora joyfully, sensed something was deeply wrong, but their access was shut off. Nathaniel was carefully, methodically isolating the little girl. The abuse escalated in terrifying silence. Zamora's natural curiosity, the very essence of toddlerhood, agitated Nathaniel. She moved too much, made too much noise, resisted his control. So, he began giving her small doses of illicit substances to dull her reactions, to keep her quiet. When she cried, he hit her. When she resisted, he punished her. One night, after the little girl struggled away from his grasp and ran to another room, Nathaniel snapped. He waited until Za passed out, again, and then twisted Zamora's legs with monstrous force, breaking both. From that day on, she could no longer stand. A baby who had just started walking, exploring her world with wonder, was now condemned to crawl in pain, or worse, not move at all. By September 2024, Zamora's condition had deteriorated so much that hiding the truth became nearly impossible. Her body was thin, bruised, and silent. Her spirit, the one that used to light up entire rooms, was barely flickering. On September 5th, Nathaniel moved the family into a new home, this time living with Za's grandmother, Malene Pass, a 75-year-old woman who immediately noticed that something was horribly off. Zamora, now nearly 2 years old, couldn't stand, hardly spoke, and had lips red and swollen. Malene was told the child had fallen in the bathtub, that a pediatrician visit was scheduled, that it was just allergies. But the truth was darker than anyone could imagine. And then came the night of September 9th. A neighbor later recalled hearing haunting cries in the dark, cries that abruptly stopped. That night, Nathaniel struck Zamora in the head with such force it caused a brain hemorrhage. Instead of calling for help, he gave her another dose to knock her out, and went to bed. By morning, her little heart had stopped. September 10th, 2024. The sun had barely risen when Za Goodwin woke to chaos. Her daughter lay unresponsive on a mattress in the corner of the room. Nathaniel was panicking, splashing water on Zamora's face in a desperate attempt to revive her. It was a method often used by substance abusers to wake someone from an overdose. But Zamora wasn't overdosed. She was dying. Za finally called 911. By the time paramedics arrived, the child had no pulse. She wasn't breathing. Her tiny body was cold. The EMTs worked feverishly, injecting adrenaline, performing CPR. After agonizing minutes, they managed to restore a heartbeat. But it was too late. She was unconscious, on a ventilator, and would never wake up again. When police arrived at the house on Torres Circle North, they immediately noticed something was wrong, very wrong. The story Nathaniel and Za told about a bathtub fall didn't match the evidence, not even close. In Zamora's room, detectives found blood-soaked sheets, diapers stained with blood, and discarded bandages. There were syringes and substances. The space looked less like a child's bedroom and more like a torture chamber. "This wasn't a home," one officer said. "This was a crime scene." At the hospital, doctors documented her injuries, each more horrifying than the last. A massive brain hemorrhage from blunt force trauma, a broken arm, both legs fractured at different stages of healing, ligature marks on her neck, bruising and cuts covering her fragile body, and worst of all, evidence of sexual assault so severe that veteran medical staff reportedly broke down in tears. Toxicology results revealed prohibited substances in her bloodstream, traces of what Nathaniel had used to sedate her. Her lips, raw and swollen, showed chemical burns from forced ingestion. And despite the doctor's best efforts, the damage was irreversible. Brandon, her father, rushed to the hospital the moment he heard. Seeing his daughter connected to machines, motionless, he collapsed. "I didn't know how to function anymore," he later said. In a final act of love and defiance against the cruelty inflicted on her, Brandon had a second tattoo of her name inked, this time across his face, a permanent cry for justice. 9 days later, on September 18th, surrounded by family, Brandon made the hardest decision of his life. He removed Zamora from life support. The next day, both Nathaniel Davis and Za Goodwin were arrested. Initially charged with child neglect, their bonds were set at $500,000 each. But this was only the beginning. In March 2025, a grand jury indicted Davis for first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, sexual battery, and evidence tampering. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, one of the rarest and most severe punishments under Florida law. Za was charged with aggravated manslaughter of a child, held responsible for her failure to protect her daughter. As of May 2025, the trial has not yet begun, but the evidence is overwhelming, and the memory of Zamora, what she endured, looms large in every courtroom document, every autopsy photo, every broken heart left behind. The death of Zamora Lee Foe sent shockwaves through Jacksonville and beyond. It wasn't just another crime, it was a collective heartbreak, a story so horrific, so intimate, that it pierced through the noise of everyday tragedies and demanded to be heard. Within days, a vigil was held at Stockton Park. Dozens gathered silently beneath the fading sun, clutching blue balloons, the color of Zamora's eyes. Candles flickered in the evening breeze, casting soft light on photographs of a little girl who once laughed, splashed in her backyard pool, and hugged a stuffed giraffe in her sleep. Many brought teddy bears and children's toys, which were later donated to shelters for abused kids. Others simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by grief, disbelief, and fury. Online, thousands shared her story using the hashtag #JusticeForZamora, and soon it was trending across the state. People who had never met her wept. Parents held their children tighter. Survivors of abuse spoke out. Activists demanded reform in how the justice system tracks and handles repeat offenders like Nathaniel Davis. "How did a man with a violent past end up alone with a baby?" one commenter wrote. "How many warnings were ignored?" Local news outlets covered the case in detail, amplifying calls for change. Social workers, community organizers, and attorneys began examining gaps in protective services, pointing to systemic failures that allowed Zamora's suffering to go unnoticed until it was too late. And through it all, Brandon remained a symbol of unwavering love. Despite his disability, despite his trauma, he showed up. To the hospital, to the courtroom, to the vigil. He spoke publicly about Zamora, not as a victim, but as a little girl full of life. He called for accountability, not vengeance, and he made a decision that turned his daughter's final moments into a legacy of hope. He chose to donate her organs. Zamora's heart saved the life of a 6-month-old baby girl with a congenital defect. Her liver and kidneys went to 2 other infants, giving their families the very miracle that had once blessed his own. "I wanted part of her to live on," Brandon said. "Maybe some meaning can come out of this senseless tragedy." In a way, it did. Zamora's name became a symbol, not of death, but of the urgent need to protect the innocent. Her story didn't fade, it sparked change. Zamora Lee Foe was not just a case file, she was a child, a daughter, a light in the lives of those who loved her, and now, an angel taken far too soon. She never got to run through sprinklers on a summer day. She never learned to write her name or pick her favorite color. She never got to grow into the woman her father imagined on the day he held her, dreaming of a future filled with beauty and love. That future was stolen, and yet, she left something behind. In her final hours, surrounded by people who truly loved her, Zamora gave life to others. Her tiny heart beats in another baby's chest. Her story moves strangers to tears. Her name lives on, in tattoos, in vigils, in whispered prayers, in courtroom walls where justice is still being fought for. But we must ask ourselves, how many more Zamoras are out there right now? Unseen, unheard, unprotected. What would you do if you suspected a child was in danger? Would you speak up? Would you check again? Would you call someone, anyone, before it was too late? We can't change what happened to Zamora, but we can carry her name forward. We can share her story. Not to dwell in darkness, but to shine a light where monsters hide, to hold systems accountable, to remind each other that silence, even when comfortable, can be deadly. If you've watched this far, you now know her name. Say it. Remember it. Zamora Lee Foe. Fly high, little angel. Would you like me to create the YouTube description and hashtags optimized for this video on Crimeline?